Energy Research Center has a round table today with an interesting title: Ukrainian Water-and-Sewage Public Utilities Relief from Energy Debt Burden Delayed. Who is guilty and what should be done? I will introduce you our participants. On those tables where speakers are not here, I will try to prove you why they are not absent. Deputy Minister of the Region Development should participate in our round table, but unfortunately he is ill and Ministry couldn't find substitute for him for our today's discussion. From National Regulatory Commission of Ukraine, there is Artem. He is a director of the Department of Tariff Politics of Water Distribution and Water Supply. Also, we have a representative of the Ministry of Finance, Artem Navrata. Also, there is director of Ternopilvodokanal, and he doesn't just represent Ternopil, but he also represent other water supply services. Volodymyr Kuzma. Also, Tatiana Gryaznova is with us, CFO of Kyivvodokanal, and our round table will last for 1 hour and a half. It is on air. Also, there is a simultaneous interpretation to foreign languages, and I'm kindly ask the speakers to be attentive in their speeches, to let the interpreters to work in convenient way, and give him a chance to translate everything that you spoke. So, as we don't have a representative of the Ministry of Regional Development, Construction and Housing, I will try to explain the media our topic. During a long period of time, due to the state policy, the canals of Ukraine were supplying to population, to their consumers, water and provided them services of water distribution according to tariffs that were lower than their self-cost. The state and the authorities defining these tariffs decided, and it was proved in written documents, to compensate this gap by common calculations of tariffs. This practice exists for many years already. Unfortunately, for more than 10 years. Every enterprise of water supply, water distribution, the same as all other communal enterprises, for example, heat supply enterprises, they prepare documentation, calculating the volume of the services they provided to the population, calculate the losses they had because of this water supply to the population, on the tariffs that were not proved economically. They calculate the losses and then give them to the committees that were formed within regional administrations. Now the order of the building is different, but actually the same, because this committee could be municipal or regional. And in this committee, there are representatives of all competent authorities that could approve that the primary documents and all the information submitted corresponds to the reality, and they approve this sum to be compensated to this enterprise. Unfortunately, that is not cash. There are just funds that come to the enterprise as clearing operation. Money from state funds go to the enterprise in the established volume according to the distribution formed by the Ministry of of construction and housing, and after that it goes to pay these debts from these communal enterprises. So enterprises, they get compensation and they give it back at the same day. But there is a serious preparation work before this day on calculation of the losses of enterprise, on approving those debts that it wants to reimburse, and after that agreement is signed. As example, this is a chain. For example, state funds, communal enterprise, energy enterprise, that it has debts to the communal enterprise. Energy enterprise that supplied energy reimburse the debt at Energorynak. Energorynak at the generating companies, generic companies for those coals that they burned already but didn't pay for it. And the miners, for example, they pay some tax obligation to the state budget of Ukraine. Here our chains end. After that there is a clearing operation, and the outstanding just disappears on this stage. And this finance year, our government decided to make this calculation, and they issued order number 375 with the rules according to which they will do it. They approved the distribution on the regions to distribute it in the correct way depending on the losses that communal enterprises had in these regions, paid the debts that they had, to use the funds maximum effectively. This year there are some new rules how these common calculations are made. It is allowed to communal enterprise don't just get compensation of the losses they had from the water supply on the deficit tariffs at the population, but also it's allowed by communal enterprises who issued ready product to give it to other communal enterprises. It's not a secret that in the territory of Ukraine there are a lot of communal enterprises that sell ready drinking water to each other in Dnipropetrovsk region, in Ternopil region, Lugansk region. Volodymyr will tell us about it a little later. There is this example. At the moment we don't have representatives of Bilotserkivvoda, but they also had the situations, so country knew about it and decided to make the life of water supply people better by issuing the order, by issuing this table, and even after making the part of calculations, they decided to collect information one more time, and those volume of state subventions that were planned to have from state budget, they decided to get additional information and optimize the information after making the first part of the calculation. It was at the beginning of the summer. For the time being, the situation is the following. There is an order, there is a desire to make these calculations, but at the moment it doesn't happen. Utilities are still having these debts. Now we are in the middle of November already. Energy company keep calculating fees to the debts. Until this moment it will never go into tariffs, so in their perspective they don't have reimbursement resource. And at the same time, energy companies get from state enterprise fees and penalties that also won't be part of the tariff. This is the situation we have for now. And if we keep on delaying the decision of the situation, we will live with consequences. And today we will try publicly to understand these consequences and how in the future it will reflect on the quality of the service that everybody gets. I mean water. Open the tap at home, we're supposed to have the water of the corresponding quality, and we can try to understand how it will influence to our pockets. That's briefly the topic of our roundtable. And now I propose to start the representatives of water supply and water distribution enterprise, and maybe they will tell us in details, or maybe I missed some nuances of this process. And now I'm asking Volodymyr Kuzmin, the head of the Ternopilvodokanal.
Good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank on behalf of the Association of the Water Channel companies, Water-and-Sewage company, to thank all the companies for communicating about that. Our association unites most of the enterprises in this sector, and we have even middle-sized and small companies. We now unite more than 200 enterprises. When I'm talking about my company, I can tell that we have been discussing it many times at different meetings at the level of different companies, and all the problems are similar in this for everyone in the system. And the result of the financial activity in this year and in the previous years, the financial situation is getting worse with the year to year, with each accounting period. The water channels have losses. There were a few periods when we would have more or less objective tariff. From July last year, for several months we had more or less objective tariff. Before that and after that, we are always working with the profit-losing tariff. What does that mean? The volumes of expenditures of the company in order to produce the final service to the consumer are higher than the revenues we receive after we send invoices to the consumers. These are the services which are regulated by the state. We cannot ourselves set price. The price is set by the regulator, by NERC. And you know probably that this National Commission was transformed. They merged two commissions and created one, and now we have this merged body. And now the issue is whether the National Commission really manages to address all the challenges we have in our sector. So we have losses which are getting bigger and bigger with every year. And talking about the compensating mechanism, the question is logical, but this state mechanism of compensation didn't work in the past. There were years when the difference in tariff wasn't compensated to us. The compensation of the difference in tariffs happens only partially. Only the expenditures of the company are compensated for providing the services to population, and that is 70-80% of our consumers. That's the majority, but still 20-30% are not compensated, and the company doesn't have any other sources to cover these expenditures. So increase of such losses leads to the company itself being profit losing. the tariffs for other consumers, for budgetary organizations, were profitable in the past, but now the situation has changed, and from July 2014 we have one single tariff for all groups of consumers, and we have now losses, especially when it comes to budget organizations, industries, businesses, and small businesses. The second thing related to the mechanism of compensation, it happens with big delay. First half of the year, they just start passing the resolutions and start allocating the funds. Only this year for half a year, no one would compensate us anything. For this period of time, we have to still pay to our creditors, and our creditors are energy supply organizations, tax administration or state fiscal service, and also we need to pay salaries. We always have a dilemma. We lack money, what to pay first. In all cases, there is the responsibility, including criminal responsibility, and in all cases the fines are accrued, and also the mechanism of use of compensation is very narrow. We had the mechanism of compensation via paying debts on VAT payment. So in order to pay to the state, we had to create the debt on VAT, then the fines were accrued, and we also have to pay the penalty, and after we get money, only after that we could pay the debt. We very often pay 20%, because this process of paying the difference could last for several months. Like in our company, the first protocol was processed in July, and the second protocol hasn't been processed yet, and that is why we have the sanctions imposed, and this accounts to 700,000 hryvnias, and also the energy sector companies present their sanctions and fines. For the amount of 3,400,000, 3,200,000, we had a debt for the half a year, which was about 6 million hryvnias. The energy supply company presented the fine of almost 4.5 million hryvnias. We have like 6 or 7 million debt and 4.7 million penalty. The penalty is related to the credit rate of the National Bank. You remember the period when it was 30%, and so the penalty is accrued in the amount of double rate. In the first half of the year, we had an awful increase of inflation. It was up to 30%. And energy supply organizations make use of that. Now they claim 4.5 million hryvnias. But where would the company get money to pay that? No one gives us that answer. On the one hand, the state regulator did not set the economically substantiated prices on time, and that is why we are now having these big problems. We addressed to the Verkhovna Rada, to the National Committee, to the Ministry, but no one reacts to that, and most of the Vodokanals are now in the situation when the heating season is at the threat. If the court satisfy the claims of energy supply companies, and also they will add fines on taxes, so eventually our money will be arrested and the operation of the companies will be paralyzed. We will not be able to execute our commitments. That's very serious situation. It's not because we are inactive. There are subjects which have some state powers, but and they have to address these issues in advance. But also they need to think about how can we pay debts that we already have. One more thing which is related to the fact that during the last period of time, the share of compensation of subsidies provided to the population has grown up. In the past, that share wasn't that big for most Vodokanals. This money go as a transit, and that is happening within a month or 2 months. In our case, in the past, it was 300,000, which was about 10% of our monthly payment for electricity. Now these amounts grew up. It's about 40-50% of our monthly payment for electricity. The mechanism of compensation goes in such a way the budget allocates money to pay subsidies. If there is some delay, then half of our annual payment for electricity, we fail to pay that half. And then we receive warnings that the energy supply, electricity supply will be limited or will be suspended. But again, we are hostages of that situation because we again request the Ministry of Energy to pay attention to that. It is important to provide financing on time so that we even do not think about the possibility to stop providing our services. Also, the issue of tariffs is unpleasant for our listeners, for those who are here. I don't want to pay for services high tariff, but for us to understand the difference between the tariff for gas, for water, and electricity. The average tariff for large water canals, the average tariff per 1,000 liters is about 10 hryvnias. And the smaller municipalities, the larger is tariff, but average is 10 hryvnias. 10 hryvnias is 1 kopeck per liter of water, so that you understand. It's for 1 liter of sewage. You know that there are many points where many places where the water is sold. You will never buy water for 1 kopeck. The water is not expensive, and the structure of expenditures of every consumer, the water share is not so big. So basically, when people say that when the tariffs went up so big, we don't want to add more burden on people, but we believe that either there should be an objective tariff set up or there should be the compensation from the budget. Talking about Ternopil, for us to be able to operate profitably, the tariff should be like 20%. That's not a big difference, which affects payment of the services by our consumers. They can pay such money, and we are ready to organize awareness campaign for that. But at the same time, the delay in review of tariffs leads to increase of losses, and till we resolve all the issues related to fines, we will always have problems. If the country wants to make the tariff cheaper for final consumer, there is a method for that. I agree. When we need to do that, we need to find this way. There are many of such ways. First, the VAT from our services could be either reduced or just cancelled. I'm sorry. We are moving to discussing tariffs now, but this is not the topic of our today's roundtable. So 20-30 seconds and I'm finishing. It could be reducing of VAT, reducing some taxes like payment for subsoil, like fee for subsoil, for oil. And there are ways. We are ready to have a dialogue, but we support the idea that Vodokanals should have an objective tariff. I would like now to give the floor to Financial Director. Instead of General Director, we have the Financial Director of Bilotserkivvoda. So back to the question of compensation of differences in tariffs, the problems that we have today and the problems that we have in the result of such compensation. So I would like to request you to emphasize two issues which you have in your Vodokanal. The first one, and that is my subjective opinion, reading the resolution by the Ministry of the representatives of the housing and construction, when they say that you have losses when you supply water to some other Vodokanal that provides services to the population. So the ministry says in such a case, yes, you have the right, but only to the part that your counteragent, which is your Umansky, Uzinsky Vodokanal, supplied water to the population. And how will you pay your taxes in the result of such settlements, because you will become artificially profitable in one period of accounting. Yes, this is quite a complicated issue.
And maybe our audience don't understand it, but for the utility company, that is now in a very complicated situation. It's a very timely question, and we on behalf of association, on behalf of our enterprise, we are the representatives of these authorities, the Supreme Court, also to our region, to the Ministry of Finance. There is an act, but there are no clearing payments at the moment. Of course, we are very glad that at least we have that act, because it was effective from it was issued in June and became effective from July, and really all the payments were delayed, and now enterprise is a very difficult situation, and all our consumers of all our Vodokanals are accustomed that this service is provided constantly, 24/7. We are providing the service. Of course, there are some problems. Of course, there are some claims from consumer side. Maybe something's wrong with the quality or some other issues. But so far, we are trying not to have the situation when we don't provide water. Nobody is sitting without water in our region, but it's very difficult for the enterprise itself, because at the moment we are under double pressure from energy companies and from tax authorities, because from the both side they threaten us with the cases, they threaten us with the courts that can, and we can waste a lot of time and money with this situation, and we might even have our accounts arrested because we have tax debt. But at the same time, state has a debt with us because of these not covered losses. Also, our enterprise is providing Uman with the water, and this is 1/3 of our water supply facilities. Until this moment, we were calculating this gap only with the population of Bilotserkivvoda. There was no Uman in this calculation at all. We were working with losses. Now we have other enterprises partially in this calculation, but also there is one more issue. Maybe it's complicated to understand for the audience, but for the moment, our tariffs established for the hot water and cold water is a part of these hot water tariffs. So we are providing the service of heat supply organizations that provides hot water, but from legal point of view, we are providing the services to the administrative enterprise. I mean heat supply companies, and this part is not considered in our calculations. And also there is one more kind of services, and maybe from the new year we will start discuss it actively. It's cold water tariff using local network, as it's called. Cold water. So in the composition of cold water, there will be the servicing of meters in the apartments, and also the maintenance of people who are providing service in concrete residential building. At the moment, we are making calculation based on the established tariffs of water supply and water disposal, as we call it, within our balance dependence. But what is inside the residential building is not covered at all. So there are these three issues that brings administrative activities of the enterprise in kind of dead end, and every day we should decide what to pay and who will disconnect us first. Energy companies will, or tax authorities will arrest our accounts. And for the moment, these issues are not solved, and every day is important for us, because we need to buy the most important things for our activities. I mean reactive agents, I mean fuel. To pay at least minimum taxes to the salary, because this is our priority. Penalties are waiting for us everywhere, and there is no reimbursement of penalties in any mechanism. And these amounts are very huge. There are millions. And I don't know how we will go out from this situation, how enterprise can develop in such situation, how we can take more obligations on investment programs. It's almost impossible. But investment program, it's our development, it's our future. Yes, the situation is clear, but could you give us an example? For example, miracle happened, and notwithstanding the fact that now there is the middle of November, you had enough time to send the agreements and to fill that gap in tariffs that is correct from the point of view of committees that confirm this volume, and all your documents are correct, and from the ministry side also. And differentiating the tariffs in one tax period, for example, fourth quarter, could you become profitable? Yes. And the payment of profit tax, is it considered in your tariff? Of course not. That's exactly what I wanted to hear from you, that example, that in the result of the decision of solution situation in one aspect, we will have problem in other aspect. Yes, because we had the same situation last year, because last year we could cover our debts, rather huge debts, and we had profit. But we needed to pay almost 2 million, and for our small enterprise it's a huge. We need to pay 2 million profit tax. And of course this tax, it is not considered anywhere. We needed to cover it. We needed to pay it due to the reimbursement of the loss, but it's not foreseen anywhere. In any tariff we can find it. In any calculation, we can consider this amount. It's just not true, because it would be criminal otherwise. And by this way, the funds of the enterprise are washing out constantly, and we are living in this stressful situation all the time. Thank you very much. And Kyivvodokanal could describe us briefly their situation, and we have with us Oksana Lipkovska. She's the representative of the legal department of Kyivvodokanal. Yesterday execution service made two decision about the arresting of the account of Kyivvodokanal. That is the live position. Yes, that is position that happened already, and due to that, of course, the resource of reactive agents will be finished, and enterprise can't be responsible for the quality of water supply, and they would need to stop the supply, not to have epidemics. So what could be one of the way of solving the situation is the issuing of the law that now is in Supreme Court. It is the law number 2706, and I will tell you about what is this law about. This draft law proposes to prohibit the penalties to the enterprise who didn't get from the state or from some other parts of executive authorities compensation on the losses we are discussing today. This draft law is in Verkhovna Rada already, and it can solve the situation completely. If you have a loss tariff, but from New Year it's not possible, because there is a law about prohibition of the tariffs that are not proved economically. But still, if it exists, and if you don't have the difference in tariff, it would be prohibited on all that and all the supply chain to give the penalties to each other. To stop that artificial growing of mutual debts due to the let's call it not perfect state policy. And now, when we have complete dramatic picture of water supply, now I want to give the floor to your opponents, who maybe will give us something about the situation in energy field that they have, because you don't feel this gap in tariffs. I give the floor to Tatiana Griznova, CFO of Kyivvenergo. First of all, it's very pity that representatives of the Ministry of Regional Development are not with us today, because that is the state authority that was made to regulate the relationship between all the players in this industry. The level of payments of Vodokanal is reducing every year. If last year the average percentage of calculation for electricity was about 78%, in 2015 it was 10-15% less. If last year the growth of the debt was explained that these tariffs are not economically proved and that state doesn't compensate the gap, that's what my colleague told you about already. But according to the same regulator, from July 2014, Vodokanals of Ukraine have economically proved tariffs. If it's not true, 2015, according to the state budget, still allows Vodokanals to approve the gap in tariffs. That is the reason of their non-payments. In particular, debts on compensations and gaps in tariffs at Vodokanals and heat companies of Ukraine was about 4 billion hryvnia. For the 10 months of this year, the debt of Vodokanals is 1 billion more. For the 1st of November, Vodokanals are owing to energy companies 5.4 billion hryvnia. But as a result, Oblenergo, as energy people, we can't pay our obligation on the energy market for the electricity that we bought there. As a result, energy market give us penalties, inflations, and court payments. The obligations of Kyivvodokanal that not depending on fact do we have money or not, does Vodokanal pay us or not, only on penalties we should pay about 58 million hryvnia. As a result, energy market, when they don't get money from Oblenergo for this money, they can't pay to the companies that generate energy and sell it at the energy market. For example, during 10 months of this year, energy market has that 7.9 million hryvnia more. And the debt at the Kyivvodokanal is 635 million hryvnia. And that was the consequence of non-payments of the canals. The continuation and how this story can continue. If you can't pay to the suppliers of the raw, for example, the suppliers of coal, and we can see that this situation has no solution. And this industry, it can't survive in just in one part. All the system should be okay. But as for me, if you are building the system around non-accruing of the penalties based on the fact that starting from some moment, the mechanism will be built sooner or later. There will be economically proved tariffs, and there will be possibility of economic regulators to react to the changes of one of the components of tariffs to avoid in the future tariff differences. At normal market, parties could sign the agreements and treaties, and they would understand their obligations.
Unfortunately, today the Vodokanal are in the situation when they cannot execute on their liabilities. In Kiev, I can tell you, the settlements on privileges and subsidies, some parts of the population are financed or refinanced by the supplier of water and heating at the account of subsidies. From May till September this year, there was a work going on introducing amendments to the new form of protocol to provide for subsidies which would pay the debt to Water-and-Canal. In the result, in Kiev, non-payments for water and electricity from February to September were 150 million hryvnias. Non-payments to Vodokanal, 28 million hryvnias. In order to introduce changes into one document, 5 months were needed. We don't have the representative of the regulator here. I mean the Ministry of Regions. As to compensation of the difference in tariffs, in the budget of 2015, there was a compensation in the amount of 5.4 million hryvnias. That is just for water 5.6 billion hryvnias. out of which 4 billion, the source for them is the general fund of the state budget and the special fund. But the settlements were made for 0.7 billion hryvnias. Kyivvodokanal, we understand it's about survival of all of us. We are parts of one chain. And the actions of energy sector are the forced actions because they also suffer from the sanctions from energy market. About Kyivvodokanal, the difference in tariff is 209 million hryvnias. The agreement was signed 4 months ago. In June, the Territorial Commission confirmed the calculation of the difference in tariffs. We're still in the process of signing that with the energy market and the Naftogaz. What we see in Kiev, it's not about difference in tariffs. In fact, here the difference between the situation we have today and the situation of the past is related to the fact that everyone believed that costs just pennies, it is possible not to pay for that, and this was always covered somehow, and the total debts probably led to the situation when utilities do not know how to work with their debtors. They have to be more active. They have to more proactively suggest changes into the system of providing communal services. What I've heard here is nothing new for me. Kyivvoenergo is also the company which is supplying hot water and central heating. And I can say the same about the problems of supply of heat. The solution should be in settling relations at the level of the state. Just 1 minute. I would like to support my colleague and at the same time mention that, for example, our company is actively working with the debtors. We practically don't have don't have the debt from the industries and enterprises. We do have the debt from the population, but the judicial fee was increased 6 times. Now, for us to submit the claim to the court, we first have to pay 600 hryvnias per one person. Then, if the decision, if the ruling of the court is positive, then the debtor has to pay this 600 hryvnias. So we basically suspended this work, having such debts on electricity. We cannot allocate funds to actively launch this campaign. And we have about 2 million of debt, 70%. That is the whole mechanism of receiving the debts by companies is not operating. And also I would like to support the colleague. And that is what's interesting to regular supplier, consumers. The subsidies submitted to the population grew up, the amount grew up by 2-3 times. So the subsidy is working, but the mechanism of receiving the subsidy should be stable, so that this amount is repaid every month. One small remark to what you've said, I believe you missed that. The utilities, Water-Canal and the heating utilities, you don't have any other way of addressing the problem of that you have to do it only via the court. You cannot disconnect the consumer without the court ruling. We are trying to do something, but it could be done only via the court. But there are people, we 2 times, 3 times submitted claims against them, but it's not realistic to receive this money. The whole mechanism isn't working. The executive service doesn't work. And even if the executor comes to the data, to the apartment, there are certain regulations, certain norms, 1 TV set, 1 refrigerator per family. And our average citizen, there's nothing to confiscate. A couple of TV sets were confiscated, but who needs them? We have the representatives of the state bodies, and I have to give them the floor so that they can explain what they think about the situation. We still have some time. The work with the data is the work which is done by Vodokanals. But even if we collect all the debts, we still will not have enough money to pay our debt. That is our second question. How will that affect the pockets of consumers? But first, the representative of the state. We have 2 Artems, the representative of the Ministry of Finance and national regulator. Maybe you could suggest some ways of addressing these issues. Good afternoon. Thank you again for this opportunity to say a few words. To talk about the ways of addressing that without the ministry will be difficult. Very often we have to look for the ways of addressing problems without the presence of the ministry. That's our life. And the representatives of the companies here are a good example of that. So a few words about the situation. The law on the budget provides for 5.6 billion as to pay the debt. In this situation, this resolution 375 should be amended. On the 27th of October, these amendments were passed by the Cabinet of Ministers. Amendments were introduced into distribution. And according to the budgetary code norms, this distribution is to be approved by the Committee of the Verkhovna Rada. And as far as I know, it has to be received.
Это если говорить...
Talking about the obstacles that we have this year. As to the prospects, you've already mentioned that there is the law 626, which says that from the 1st of January 2016, the tariff should be set at the level of economically substantiated, and the same law stipulates for the debt which is which is the debt as of the 1st of January, it should be repaid by the 1st of June. So this will allow to reduce quasi-fiscal risks which affect the state budget deficit. On the one hand, on the other hand, it will allow the companies to improve their financial indicators. I will try to help you asking questions. From the point of view of theory, that is true, but practically, till the moment when, by the middle of 2017, all debts are paid, Kyivvoenergo will continue to accrue penalties, fines to Kyivvodokanal, and the representative of the national regulator will not include these sums into the tariff. There are two companies. Both of them are operating according to the law, and the regulator operates according to the law. And we still owe each other. The debts will be paid. I am sure that sooner or later there will be a mechanism. But what to do with fines and penalties? These are money to be taken out of the economy of a water supply company. And I have doubts that I will be getting mineral water from my tap. I understand that you are the work of the department. You have the head has a deputy minister, the deputy minister has a minister. Please report to them. What we've been discussing here. In perspective, everything's fine, but in practice, I will repeat, the problems are to be addressed together with the sectoral ministry. That's very important. We've heard that. I believe that everyone present here will really appreciate if the Minister of Finance invites the Deputy Minister of Regional Development and will say, this is the problem to be addressed. And the Deputy Minister of Regional Development will come not just with the understanding that there is a problem, but with the proposal how it could be addressed. And you can hear the options of or the ways of resolving the problem from every company that is here. Good afternoon. When setting economically substantiated tariffs, such a thing as difference in tariffs shouldn't be present. There are situations when we do have this difference in tariffs. There is the methodology according to which the company has to submit the application and calculation of the cost. According to the methodology, the national regulator cannot adjust or set the tariff in accordance with this methodology. Some companies, which are our licensees, they do not submit applications, and they do not calculate the cost. The Commission regulates 90% of services provided by Water-Canal. 10% are regulated by local authorities. There is also a problem or situation when, even when documents are submitted on time by the licensee, the Commission does not set the tariff timely. If the calculation was submitted during a month, the people in Commission are to make also calculations, and they have to do that for that company. And there is also such a service that was mentioned, cold water. And there's the regulation which is to be approved by the Ministry of Justice, and minimum 2 months after the company submits the calculation of the cost, we have to calculate ourselves, and within a month we have to get it processed in the Ministry of Justice. Same way we did the analysis of calculating the calculations of payments for electricity. We looked at the costs included into the tariffs when it comes to electricity, and they do cover the kilowatts were included in 2014, and the companies now sell less, they reduce the pumping of the water, and we still have this costs for 2014, and we took the forecast, we made adjustment in the tariff. As to electricity, well, it is included into the tariff. There are situations where artificially the difference in tariff is created, having money, having costs, the companies artificially increase the debt, and then the money is spent for some other purposes.
Artem, now we are in the situation when we need to change the system. The system of tariff building that is working now in utility enterprises, expenses plus the first. Using the expenses and other components, we have the prime cost of 1 unit of goods. But if we reduce the prime cost and the expenses are the same, we have the growth. And if we adjust only electricity, it's not right, because there is fuel also, salaries, reactive agents. The cost of these expenses also varies. I wanted to tell that these funds sent to other needs. Very often they are sent to cover the losses because of the extra standard losses of the canal. But about other components, today we have Act number 670 that tells us that National Committee should form the methods on tariff building. And of course, this methods will start acting from January 2016, and it should cover all expenses. We also have the proposals, and we share these proposals on the methods because we foresee 2 periods. First one is reporting period, other one is regulatory planning period. What is foreseen here? Compensation of the expenses of the enterprise in previous period of time, targets are surcharges we call it, and also price forecast, because our colleagues in the energy department have a practice. In the last quarter, for example, they have forecast growth of the energy prices. They give it to us, and we can foresee these expenses as well. And now we are considering the forecast prices for the electricity for the next period during the year. these issues we are discussing today, lack of funds to pay the electricity, we will put it into prime cost. And in the same way, if they have any other additional price growth and also additionally foreseen price growth. And before questions from the audience, maybe you have some comments, proposals, and also it would be very nice to hear from you based on the situation that we discussed already, how it will influence on our pockets in perspective. We need to understand that tariff is not a popular topic, but for sure, and Artem will support me in that, of course, tariffs will grow. In July last year, they were made economically proof, but taking into consideration the inflation rate and the general situation in the country, of course, this tariff doesn't reimburse the expenses now, and these tariffs that were made by National Committee to the Most of Enterprise, of course, I can't say for all of them. From the next year, we are considering only adjust of prices for electricity, but we understand ourselves that enterprise also needs reactive agents, and these prices are also growing. Also fuel, gas, salaries for the personnel to provide the work of the enterprise. And also we need pipes, we need taps, we need metal. You understand yourself the price, how the price growing for all these materials, but enterprise needed to provide the correct function of the sewage system. So if we will have economically correct tariffs, they will grow. Plus volume reduction. That is a significant factor influencing the size of tariff. And objectively, if we have water metering system, knowing that we don't have some other consumers we don't know about, sales volume are dropping. You continue sales. That is economics. There is no growth. While prices are growing, I'm thinking about how to reduce my volumes. And people are saving because 95% of residential buildings bought the meters already. And they calculate the water, but I have been always saying that there are no enterprises more interested in the industry or some other fields of interest than water supply, because we are very interested in good function. This topic is not popular at all. Vladimir, what about your point? I agree with my colleague because there are some objective reasons why tariffs will be growing, but also we have the term of tariff, that is a payment for the 1 unit of product, and also there is a definition cost of product. It depends on how much he will spend, consumer will spend. And we will investigate in the experience also abroad, and we can see that there is a reduction of water supply all over the world because this service becomes more and more expensive. And the solution for us is to have meter at home, because if you have meter, you could follow what needs do you have and how do you use it. Before, for example, some people could spend 300 liters a day, but now it's 75, 80. It depends, of course, how they follow, but still we can see the trend. And also Ukrainian delegation went to Poland, and for us is a positive because Poland had a similar system, and some time ago they had modernizations thanks to the funds from the European Union, but till now they're saying that water volume are being reduced, and the indicators are less from one year to another. So if we calculate our figures in the big cities, for example, if it's 10 hryvnia per person, and this is 10 cubic meters a month, it means 25 hryvnia a month per person. That is the payment. Is it expensive? Let's everybody decide for himself. So objectively the tariff will grow, but we understand that we can control individually the volume of these services. Tatiana Greznova, please. I've got few comments to the speech of my colleagues, and there were links to this rule 670, also the rules 862. There are acts regulating the activity of utility enterprises in the area of services providing. In this rule 670, there were significant changes. Last significant changes were put into this rule in 2005. And Kyivvoenergo during 5 years is trying to adjust these rules to have at least some legal, clear, transparent possibility working with this sphere of services of water and hot water. And this rule 862, we officially had a proposal to the ministry about the changes to these rules from 1st of July 2014, according to the law 98, we became the company providing the service of hot water, but still we don't have any significant changes, and except for that, in the part of development of situation with consumption reduction of hot water, of cold water, of heat market, this is the direction of market to the change of price. All of us, the suppliers of the services, we should be ready for the competition. We will compete with the bottled water. We will compete with some individual heating for the house, and because every person will take the decisions. Is it easier for me to make heat at home from electricity or from the central heating system? And we should understand how to construct the economics of our company to be competitive on this market, and we need transparent rules on this market. For today we don't have them. And talking about methods that Kyivvoenergo was protecting tariffs for hot and cold water, and these rules, they are very old, and to protect the tariff, for example, heat supply companies want to protect some tariff, we need to provide 20 for volumes of economic calculations and 20 for volumes more of the technical calculations. It's not possible for regulator to provide such a volume of information. Maybe first of all we need to have we need to put regulator one level higher, and to make some criteria to the protection, to have the time to regulate industry more, to have better tools at 48 volumes of information. The situation with legislative base, it can be even the topic for the separate roundtable, because the condition of our norms and standards and materials is that for the last 4 years we had four ministers of these services, and one more issues about that we should put regulator one step higher. We need to take a law about it. Unfortunately, it's still not in the corresponding committee at Verkhovna Rada. And now we are ready for the questions from the audience. If you have any, please introduce yourself and tell who do you want to ask the question. Anton Ranik, Union Information Agency. My question is to Oksana. You told that there is a court decision about the arrest of your accounts, and in some time Kyivvodokanal will stop supplying heat and water to the city. Who was your opponent, and what is your debt for today? For today, Kyivvodokanal has a debt to supply organization. Which one? Kyivenergo. We have only one supply organization. There is a debt in this amount of 166 millions of penalties. It happened because company works as a social law tariffs, and from 2004 to 2013 the enterprise didn't have this difference in tariffs, and because of that we had that main debt, and through the criminal courts we have the main body of the debt, and we have surcharges to it. Main body of the debt was paid already thanks to the compensations from the budget, but penalties for today is this 166 millions. That is the debt of the enterprise to Kyivvenergo. Except for that, as for the time being, and still the difference in tariffs is not compensated, Kyivvenergo has a right, and they use this right to go to the court about the debts in 2014, from 2014 till now, for the amount of 320 millions, included penalties accrued to the amount of main body of debt for 180 millions. All these cases at the moment are at the final stage of the court consideration, and tomorrow all these orders, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, will go to the executive bodies. Yesterday, really, we had decisions about arrest of all the accounts of the enterprise, accumulation of money at the accounts, and usage them to pay this debt. Can you stop supplying water due to that? Can you understand, if enterprise doesn't have the possibility to use the funds on the accounts, they will be blocked. Enterprise won't have the possibility to buy something. Reactive agents, for example, or they won't have possibility to eliminate the accident in every water network or sewage networks.
Do you want to add? Yes, I would like to add a couple of words. First of all, before that situation, there were more than 10 meetings with Kyivvodokanal and representatives of Kiev city administration. There were attempts made to find ways to restructure the debt of Vodokanal. The debt of Vodokanal to Kyivvenergo is 353 million hryvnias. For 2015 it grew up by 85 million hryvnias. Vodokanal has not registered a single hryvnia of compensation of the difference in tariffs that are owed to him. So the debt of Vodokanal is from the past period, more than dozens of meetings, more than dozens of proposals to find some way out. The penalties from 2014. Kyivvenergo paid to Energomarket more than 100 million hryvnias of just penalties. They paid. So the situation is like at one of our previous roundtables when on the one hand there was a big accident in one of the collectors, the citizens of Abalone who had no water supply had problems, but Water-Canal was happy because finally the attention was paid to them. So in order for the leaders of the state to pay attention at this situation, probably the precedent should be created. This is quite a criminal idea, but if there's no water in the tap, including the Prime Minister, and he will be said that tomorrow there will be no water there, then probably they will start addressing the problem of the sector. At least that's my opinion. Talking about what the representative of Kyivvoenergo said, Kyivvodokanal all that time was talking to Kyivvoenergo, was requesting to do mutual settlement between the utilities, Kyivvoenergo and Kyivvodokanal, to mutually settle the debt. The utilities have the debt to Vodokanal of more than 400 million. That is also at the stage of execution. They owe the same to Kyivvoenergo. Today there is a reorganization of such utilities taking place. These debts are to be repaid by utilities to Kyivvodokanal and Kyivvoenergo. We came to Kyivvoenergo with the request to consider the possibility that we transfer our debt to Kyivvoenergo. We have not received any answer. I need to interrupt you. The situation is serious. You will have many more meetings. You stimulated each other to have further dialogue. Now, if you have any other questions, you are welcome to ask. No more questions. Thank you. I thank all the participants of our roundtable for discussing this problem publicly. Thank you.